there's been a lot of talk about the lottery, right? The NBA changing the lottery. Is it worth it? They had a plan that was put together that was voted down to change it. So is there a problem with the lottery right now? I know you've gone because you live in New York, so you've gone to the lottery, you've gone to the NBA draft. Is there a problem with it? And if there is, how do you fix it?
Yeah, so I am definitely more radical, I think, on the draft lottery, but I try to be even keel about it, and I kind of think it was a good thing that nothing passed as it is right now, like what they were looking at a couple weeks ago, because when you think about it, it's kind of unfair to change the system that teams have been, catering their plans for years, just at the drop of a hat. And there's a whole lot going on with pick protection, which is a huge issue. Teams made trades and instituted certain protections on their draft picks that they sent away based upon this system. And I think that there needs to be a happy medium of, alarming these teams before actually making a change, so that something that would happen take effect a couple of years from now. You can't fully cater to that because the Knicks, I think, have traded every pick to 2022 at this point. I made that up off the top of my head, but you can't cater to all of those. But I definitely think something needs to be done. For me, it's not about the tanking so much. Like Philly, if they want to be terrible, and that's fine, because that's what the system is encouraging them to do, and it's saying, if you could be as bad as you can, we can reward you in the end. But what I think needs to be done is some way to not deter teams from being good when they're close. Like my biggest fear with the Grizzlies is that, say Mark leaves next summer, you got to tear it down because you're going to be so far away from being a contender at that point. And I think that teams that have infrastructures in place, that have been succeeding, making the playoffs, I think they need to have a reason to keep pushing forward instead of tearing everything backwards and saying to their fans, hey, we have to wait 5 more years because the system says that this is how we have to get good. And I mean, there are teams that have circumvented it, like Houston, but it's rare and it's very difficult. It's incredibly difficult to do so. For me, I was just pitching some ideas around earlier today. My girlfriend thinks I'm out of my freaking mind. But I was thinking, what if you reward a playoff team that if you've made the playoffs for the past, I don't know, say 3 years in a row, and you get a lottery pick in the next draft, your draft pick, instead of being outside of the lottery, goes into a lottery, which I'm all for an evenly weighted lottery system, which I know is radical, but in my Danziger commissioner world, that's what I would do.
Okay. So do you think that there's any way to, assign based upon, if you don't make the playoffs, right? So the 14 teams that don't make the playoffs, at that point, if you don't make the playoffs, you're all equal. Everybody's name is just randomly drawn out of a hat. There's no weighted system because the worst gets more consideration, all that stuff. I mean, is that a formidable option? Do you think that's something that they would look at, or do you think that the owners are so hell-bent on making sure that the worst team has the best chance to get I mean, I don't even know how often that happens, though, because usually it's the second or third worst team that always ends up with the #1 pick. But I mean, is that an option?
See, here's the thing. That's why I was saying it's kind of bizarre world of mine that it would happen in, because usually when you move away from that, because that kind of was the system way back when, but when you move away from something, you typically tend not to go all the way back to it. They moved away from it for a reason, and I was probably in diapers at that point, so I couldn't tell you why. But to me, the other thing is you introduce such a level of suspicion when something is so completely random like that you get people talking, and people are going to talk regardless. But I mean, I could just see it now. Equally weighted system, first year, and the Lakers end up with the next LeBron James, and everyone's in an uproar. And I guess rightfully so. They're very secretive about this, but I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's plausible, but I think that I would find a way to make something a little bit more evenly weighted work, because to me, I just don't like the concept of saying, hey, you want to be good eventually, just be terrible first and go for it. And I mean, of course, you have to make the right picks and everything, but I mean, they're more often than not, the first pick is a can't miss option. So
Yes. See, I mean,
I want to see some more merit rewards.
I guess what I'm saying though is I would say that even right now, the way the draft is set up, the way the lottery is set up, is more open to that manipulation, to that secretive manipulation. Because if you were to take all 14 of those teams who didn't make the playoffs, and each representative is at the lottery draft that night, and they all put their own name into the hat or into whatever, and then they just randomly start pulling out names. I don't understand how that would be perceived as you know as cheating or the NBA rigging the lottery system. I just feel like that's the most fair. That's the best thing to do. Now, I would actually say the higher seeds in the in the guys that make the playoffs. I mean, I think you shouldn't base it upon record, but I think you should base it on the way they finish out the playoffs. Honestly, I mean, I think that's kind of how you ought to do the draft for the guys that make the playoffs. But you're right. I mean, there's a lot there. There's a lot that we could continue to talk about, but for the sake of time, let's move on to our final question.